Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 34 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail through Week 6 and the rest of the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're recording about 7:30 Sunday night, right before Sunday Night Football. And what I've learned from Sunday is we know absolutely nothing through 5 weeks.
No, we absolutely nothing. Nothing.
Everything's all over the place. Players that are playing well that shouldn't be playing well. There's running back by committee situations. Like, what I've learned is ultimately we're trying our best to give you advice based on statistics, based on situations, based on what we've seen from the past 4 weeks. But when the game starts, absolutely none of that matters. Nothing. It doesn't matter how many points X player has averaged against this team. It doesn't matter how good this player did a week ago. Like, nothing matters because this NFL season is wacky. It's like the most unpredictable season that I've seen so far. I mean, I can give you like 3 things that's consistent so far with this season in the NFL and fantasy. The Bills are a buzzsaw. The Texans are horrible, even though they won today. And like I can't even name another one. It's like nothing's consistent at this point. But
I got 2. Cooper Kupp is one of the best receivers in football, and
yes.
CMC, when healthy, is the best running back in football. That's it. That's all I got.
I don't know. Saquon Barkley's challenging him for that. But anyway, we have a lot to talk about today. It's our recap show of Week 5. We're looking forward to giving you, our recap from the weekend, telling you the biggest fantasy outtakes. We unfortunately have some injuries that need to be talked about. And we'll give you guys a Monday Night Football preview for what should be a shootout and a really high-scoring game from both a football perspective and a fantasy perspective. With that said, if this is your first time watching us, thank you so much. If you did watch our live show yesterday, it was at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, like it is every Sunday on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody that joined in, everybody that asked a question, that gave us a retweet, told us they liked the show. If you're listening from us on the podcast form for the first time after listening to the live, hopefully you enjoyed this show. Thank you so much. Again, we do that live every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. YouTube and Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Twitter is PrimeTimeFFPod, usually from 8:30 to 9:30. There's no London game next week, so if you guys want to go longer, if you guys want to keep asking questions, we'll go to 10, whatever. I don't know if the Jets are home. Nick goes to the Jets home games, but anyway, we will figure that out. Again, if this is your first time listening, thank you so much. We do the show on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. The audio version is available on all podcasting platforms, including, but not limited to, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you'd rather watch the show and listen to the show at the same time, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this video, drop a like on any video that you have watched or will watch in the future. We'd appreciate that as well. Keep connecting and interacting with us on social media, PrimeTime FFPod, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for PrimeTime FFPod, Facebook, and YouTube PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Some injury news and some updates. Let's start with the big one. Rashad Penny was carted off in the third quarter against the Saints with a foot/ankle injury. We later found out it was an ankle injury of a fractured tibia. Surgery is probable. Pete Carroll called it very serious, and it would be tough to see him get back this season.
That's rough. And
it sucks. I'm going to let you speak, Nick, because I just spit out a mouthful, but I'll let you speak, and then I'll talk about it.
I mean, Rashad Penny, he didn't look good the first 2 weeks of the season, but after that, he started heating up. He actually started looking like a very good running back, which is what we know. When he's healthy and he's out there, he's very good, but we also knew injury was likely, which is why Kenneth Walker became such a hot name with like a good rookie, and I think he popped off a big run right after the injury, so I'm sure we'll talk a lot about him on tomorrow's episode for sure.
It sucks because the reason why people were fading Rashad Penny, because last season, he ended the season 6 straight weeks with, I think, 20-plus fantasy points. He won you fantasy football championships. He did what David Montgomery did the year before. He's the guy that you needed late in the season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another one last year, won you fantasy football championships. It's kind of, if you're a good fantasy football team, the way you separate yourself in the last 6 weeks is by having that guy who just randomly goes off. It could be anybody. It was Rashad Penny last year. And They rewarded him with, I think, a 1 or 2 year contract or something like that. So he did get some money. He didn't get a long-term deal because he can't stay healthy. He was a first-round pick a couple of years ago, and every year he's been injured, and it's nothing different. And as a Seahawks fan, it sucks because I don't want any of my guys getting hurt. He looked good throughout the entire season. From a fantasy perspective, he wasn't putting up numbers, but from a running back perspective, he was looking good this year. He has an incredible burst of speed. He's elusive, and it just sucks. It sucks to see a player get hurt again. Like, I don't know how long his NFL career lasts because he's had like 4 or 5 injuries already. Like, when does he decide to hang it up? But
yeah.
From a fantasy perspective, tomorrow we will talk about it. Kenneth Walker is going to be the number 1 waiver target throughout the entire fantasy football realm. It's a spoiler alert for tomorrow's show, but we will, talk about it. But that sucks for Rashad Penny. Chris Olave in the same game left the game with a concussion in the third quarter, but he did give us a nice little gift of a touchdown. The same play, he got concussed on a play that should have been a touchdown. But it gave me points from a fantasy team, so I'm not complaining about it. I hope it's not serious because he's now had 5 straight weeks with double-digit plus fantasy points, which is pretty impressive. I don't care what your receiver's name is. I don't care if you're Cooper Kupp. Like, it's impressive to go 5 straight weeks with double-digit fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very good argument he was leading the way for Rookie of the Year. He definitely would have been Fantasy Rookie of the Year between him and Breece Hall. So definitely slows him down a little bit, but I mean,
yeah, we'll see how bad it is, but with this new NFL concussion
protocol, like a shot he comes back in a week, or he has like a Hunter Renfrow concussion where he's gone for 2-3 weeks, right? So we'll see what happens, but that team is very dinged up right now. Whoever is the wide receiver 1 this week, next week, whatever it is, like they're going to still put up fantasy points. I'm not too concerned. It's a concussion. Like, should be back within 3 weeks anyway.
Should just trade him to the Dolphins. He'll be cleared by next Sunday for sure. Speaking of Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, I put foot with question marks. He was in a walking boot after the game, which doesn't mean that anything's broken, but Mike McDaniel did say that he got stepped on. We're going to monitor it. I don't think it's anything serious. We are going to monitor it. We'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow because I'm sure we'll have an update from McDaniel. Could just be a sprain or something. I don't think it's anything that'll cause him to miss time, but did want to mention it since he was in a walking boot. That might trigger a couple of you guys if you saw the notification. All right, we're now going to do our weekend wrap. We're going to go game by game and give you our biggest fantasy football takeaway. Giants at Packers in London. I did not watch most of this game, if I'm being honest with you. But what is your biggest fantasy football takeaway from this one?
I know you have a note about the Packers wide receivers. Mine's more so about the Giants secondary. So they were ranked going into this week as the number 1 defense against opposing fantasy wide receivers.
They were top up there. I almost faded Romeo Doubs on my bus team, and I should have.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I was, and I said, all right, Romeo Doubs, like, he's still getting 8 targets, so I'm not going to say he's going to be awful against the Giants. Like, it's ridiculous to say that. But they're playing very well. It's kind of, I think of 2-3 years ago when we said Dallas Cowboys and Atlanta Falcons, like, those 2 defenses, you target them every week in fantasy. Like, you want to play against them. Like, the Giants were like that. And then the following year, they came out there and ranked in the top 5 in defense. Like, Atlanta's a top 5 defense in the NFL right now. The Cowboys last year were the number 1 defense in football. Were top 5 defense this year. Like, the Giants are starting to do that. And I don't think it's a trend. I think it's actually, like, here to stay. Dable's a very good coach. So I am worried in weeks going up against that secondary. If you look at that division, there's a lot of playable receivers between A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Terry McLaurin, and whoever you want to call the wide receiver 2 in Washington. So they're going to be a tricky team to watch out for when you do have those skill positions going up against them.
So my note for the Packers receivers is not that they disappointed, but that, and this is an overall note. I said it at the beginning of the show. We don't know anything. Well, when it comes to some of these wide receiver rooms and some of these running back by committees, we don't know anything. And that's not saying that me and Nick are dumb. I'm just saying, like, you can listen to, I don't care what analyst it is, Barry, Fantasy Pros guys, Fabiano, Adam Rank, and NFL Network. I don't care who it is. We can't predict some of this stuff. So the Packers leading wide receiver, Randall Cobb, 7 receptions on 13 targets for 99 yards. And he's also targeted in the red zone, I think, once or twice. If you look at his last few games, he was only averaging like 3 to 4 targets. So this is what I'm saying. And that's a guy that Rodgers has been with for like 10 years. So this offense and this wide receiver room is incredibly hard to predict. If you put a gun to my head and said I had to play one in best ball or something for the entire season, I'd play Romeo Doubs. But on a week-to-week basis, I think you have to evaluate your roster. And if you have a Packers wide receiver, you need to see if there's another player out there with a better matchup, because I don't think it's safe to play a Packers wide receiver on a week-to-week basis. I think it's a risk.
Yep.
I think you're playing for a Randall Cobb game, which is 7 receptions, 99 yards. That's a great game. That's 18 fantasy points. That's a good game. But if you're playing a Packers wide receiver, I think you're juggling between that 18 number and the Romeo Doubs 5 number that he produced today. So you'll have to see how that goes on a week-to-week basis. Into the 1:00 games. The Seattle Seahawks at the New Orleans Saints. It broke my heart that they lost this one. This was a rough one. Rough game. Still proud of my Hawks, though. Still proud of my Hawks. I am so glad that Nathaniel Hackett is my head coach. I am proud of my Hawks because they competed and they not embarrassed themselves on national television. Nobody's making memes about the Seahawks, except for some Seahawks fans, because that's what we do. What is your biggest takeaway from this one?
I feel like everybody was really fading DK and Lockett before the year, but I think the two of them are starting to look like must-starts. Like over the last 4 weeks, they've been phenomenal. Tyler Lockett's averaging 8 points a game through the last 4 weeks. Through the last 4 weeks for DK, he is averaging right in that 15 to 17 range. So both of them are putting up phenomenal numbers. Those are numbers that would have finished them at the end of last year as the wide receiver. I want to say it was in the 12 to 14 range. So that's a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. So both these guys appear to be startable on most weeks. That's really it. I mean, they're getting targets. It's those two weapons, and that's it out there. Gino does pass the Disley near the goal line, but outside of that, I mean, that's the way they're getting the ball through, like from goal line to goal line, and Gino's been accurate as thus far. So at this rate, I think you guys should comfortably be starting them in your lineups. I don't think it's going to be as big of a question mark moving forward.
So my biggest takeaway is that Geno Smith looks good from a football perspective and a fantasy football perspective. Right now, he's 1, 2, 3. Where is he right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's ranked 10th on ESPN right now. That is, he's actually behind Russell Wilson by 1, which shocking. His average is better. Russell Wilson has 1 more fantasy point, but Geno's average is 18.5. Russell Wilson's average is 14.9. I don't want to make this a Geno-Russell Wilson debate, so let's just flip over to average right here. Geno's average is 10th. He's behind Lamar, Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Goff, Kyler, Herbert, Burrow, Zach Wilson, and then there's Geno. So I'm just going to make this case here. I think Geno Smith is startable some weeks, and I think he's rosterable for sure. I think I'd roster him over Matt Ryan. I think I'd roster him over like Carson Wentz. I'd roster him over Trevor Lawrence. I think we're seeing a guy that's really playing at the highest level of his career, and he's in a situation that he's probably never been in his career. And do I think Geno Smith is the future of the Seahawks? No. But over the last 5 weeks, he's had over 17 fantasy points, which is a good number in ESPN standard PPR leagues. It's a good number. He's had over 17 fantasy points 4 times. He had that one messy game in San Francisco. The other 4, 17 against the Broncos defense, very good. 18 against Atlanta, okay, could have been more. 31 against Detroit, and 31 against Detroit, and 24 against New Orleans. And New Orleans is not a slouch defense. So my biggest takeaway, you could play Geno Smith. You could pick up Geno Smith, and I think I'd play him over Russell Wilson. Like, why should I trust Russell Wilson at this point, not trust Geno Smith? Anyway. Good job, Pete Carroll. Proud of you. I owe you lots of apologies. Steelers at the Bills. This was an absolute slaughtering. What's your biggest takeaway?
The Steelers absolutely suck. Kenny Pickett is not very good. I don't want to hate on him too much because it's Buffalo, your first start of your career. Like, you couldn't have asked for a worse match.
You got thrown to the Wolves, and on top of that, like, the game was he was down because of special teams, or the defense let him down on the first drive, and then they muffed the punt or whatever, or then they muffed the kick or something. What was it on the second drive? I forget what happened, but he was down like 10, 13 points, like off the bat before he even stepped on the field.
Yeah. The only bright spot I see is someone I liked before the year, and it's George Pickens. Over the last 2 weeks, and most of these in the last game came with Pickett at quarterback. I'm confusing the two names. They're so close. He had 14 targets, 12 catches, 185 yards, hasn't found the end zone yet. So if he puts together a touchdown in either one of those 2 weeks, we're talking about a guy that's averaging 18 points for one of those weeks, and not regarding that, it's 15. So he's seeing enough of a workload, and the talent is clearly there. And Deontay's being treated as a wide receiver 1, and he's not doing
Deontay Johnson is still quarterback proof. 13 targets on 5 receptions, 60 yards. Like George Pickens did one more reception and 20 more yards, but Deontay Johnson is still quarterback proof. There's just not a quarterback that's not going to pass to him. He's still great. And Pickens missed him on a couple throws. He could have had a 100-yard day with a touchdown. So, or Pickett, I should say. I get them mixed up as well. Yeah, I think the other thing is we've really undervalued and underappreciated what Big Ben was last year, even with a immobilized arm. If Big Ben's on this team, like they're probably 3-2, 4-1. That's the reality of it. So they definitely would have beaten your Jets. I'm just saying. They would have competed with the Bills. They would have lost by 10, not 20.
I don't know about that.
Maybe. My big takeaway is Josh Allen's a monster, and Gabriel Davis, when healthy, is great. He had 6 targets, which that's a number that you want to be around. Around 6 is great. 3 receptions, 171 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know Nick isn't sold on him. I don't think Nick's going to be sold on him until he sees Isaiah McKenzie and Gabriel Davis on the field for like 2 or 3 weeks, and Gabriel Davis out targets and out receptions.
I need to see,
and that's okay.
I need to see Gabriel Davis not have a Rashad Bateman or like type stat line. That's what I need to see.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, he did what he had to do today. Like, that's the reality of it. I mean, if you got Gabriel Davis, you probably won your fantasy week. First time he was healthy in 4 weeks. So, and he plays very well. Like, that's the reality of it. The 2 games that he's healthy, he's gone over 15 fantasy points. The few games he wasn't healthy, he didn't. On top of that, Buffalo's been up in like all their games. He hasn't had to make a play because they've been up. So now that he's healthy, now that Buffalo's, moving on, we'll see where that goes. But if you're worried about Gabriel Davis, I personally would not be worried about Gabriel Davis as long as he's healthy. Chargers at the Browns. This is another game where I'm just like, I can't tell you what to do anymore. There's a lot to talk about. So what do you want to talk about? Because there's a lot here to unpack.
I think me and you both need to give an apology to a certain, or I guess 2 running backs, but one in particular on the Chargers that we both faded before the year and is currently sitting as the RB1 or 2 in fantasy football.
I don't think we faded Chubb, but we both did fade Eckler. And in the last 2 weeks, I think Eckler's averaged like 30 or 40 points.
He's averaging 35 over the last 2. He didn't score a touchdown through the first 3 and still averaged 15 points per game. And he made up for, we all said touchdown regression because he had 20 last year. He scored 5 in the last 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Austin Eckler. You're going to finish. I think I had him ranked as 6 or 7 on the season, which is still possible, but I think Nick had him down to like 10 or around that range.
Maybe. I don't know.
Or between 8 and 10.
He'll be up there. Another apology. I've told you to play Joshua Palmer, and again, he disappointed because we can't figure out the Chargers like at all. Everett, really bad game. Palmer, really bad game because they're running the ball. I cannot figure out the Chargers. I can't. Like, they drive me insane. This is a team that's going to really drive me insane. Mike Williams, though, great game. 10 receptions, 134. I've been high on him for a while, but the Chargers are running near the red zone, and it's like they've almost morphed into a running team. So that's my Chargers thoughts. As for the Browns, Nick Chubb is just a bowling ball. Like, he's not a PPR back, but he's averaging 120 yards a game and a touchdown. He's a bowling ball. Amari Cooper looked good. 10 targets, 6 receptions, a touchdown, 60 yards. And David Njoku, I think, is startable week to week now. Another game, 6 receptions, 80 yards, 88. Like, Njoku is startable every week now, I think. He's in the same tier as like Darrell Everett, where he's not going to produce every game, but you could start him every week if you don't have Travis Kelce, because it's Travis Kelce and then Mark Andrews and then everybody else. Bears at Vikings. Real quick, Vikings. Real quick. You had a 21-3 lead and made me sweat out my survivor pick into the 4th quarter. I am so glad that I'm done with Kirk Cousins for the season because, oh man, that would have been really bad if the Bears won that game. I would have been livid if I didn't take it. If I was going to take the Bucs or the Vikings and I took the Vikings to get them out of the way, I would have been livid. I really would. What's your biggest takeaway from this one?
So as I've said before, right? Like, we have hoodie Carmelo Anthony, we got flu game Jordan, and we have 1 o'clock Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins is playing a bad team at 1:00. He's a fantasy starter. I know
he's a fantasy starter the first quarter, but I mean the first 2 quarters, but then they didn't play the second half to the last quarter.
He walked out with 23 fantasy points, so you're not complaining if you started him.
It drove me insane to watch them let the Bears back in that game.
And Mr. Kirk Cousins got some mobile legs because he got that Russian touchdown. So
he did.
Very interesting.
I mean, my big takeaway is that this is the Kevin O'Connell Vikings offense that we talked about before the season that we expected. You just mentioned Kirk Cousins. Dalvin Cook, they finally decided to use him near the goal line. And I think Madison robbed the touchdown from him, but Dalvin Cook had 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 receptions. Still can't crack that 100 yards. Come on, get him that bonus. Justin Jefferson, 12 receptions, 154 yards. Freak. My other big takeaway is I apologize for telling you guys to play the Bears. Well, I shouldn't actually. David Montgomery had 4 receptions for 62 yards and a touchdown.
He finished with 18 points.
Yeah, I'm not going to apologize for that. I told you to play a Bears running back, and David Montgomery started, and I said to play the starter, so I won't apologize for that. If you played Khalil Herbert, I do apologize for that because he did not get a lot of work, and it just seems like they're just going to use one running back no matter which one it is. So sorry about that. Lions at Patriots. Your biggest takeaway?
I did not see that coming. I did not see the number 1 offense in football getting shut out.
Oh, I did. And I said it on the pregame show on Sunday. I said to avoid all of your Lions because this was a terrible defense. And I like the Lions. I do. And I like Jared Goff. I like what they're doing. But I'll do my first point. You need to avoid the Lions when they're playing a good team. That's the reality of it. The Lions are not a good football team. They are an average football team that can play very well against other average or bad football teams. They finally played a good defense, and it was messy. And they were playing without their starters, too. So let's look ahead here. They have the Cowboys next week. I am fading the Lions.
They're on bye.
Oh, they're on bye. I'm sorry. I'm looking at their schedule. You're right. The week after, they're playing the Cowboys. I know that you'll still play DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I am not playing like Josh Reynolds or Jared Goff. That's just not happening. After that, it gets a little easier. I mean, the Dolphins, they could beat the Dolphins. The Packers, they could compete. The Bears, they could smush. That's a survivor pool game if I'm still in it. The Giants, that could be a tough one. But anyway, and then they have the Bills. So my point being, I don't care what the number shows about the highest scoring offense. Jared Goff is still Jared Goff.
We do have some breaking news that came through. Baker Mayfield is also in a walking boot. So probably going to have to give you an update on tomorrow's episode for the injury. But I know they gave PJ Walker reps over Sam Darnold. I think Darnold's still dinged up. But very interesting. Keep your eyes out on that.
Matt Rule's going to be fired by the next time we record.
You think so?
By next Monday, maybe. I don't know who they have next. They have the Rams next week. I don't know when their bye week is, but he's not lasting much longer, I don't think.
We'll see. We thought that for a while, so we'll have to take a look. But my biggest takeaway is play your stars against the Lions. Play your flex guys against the Lions because that defense is the worst in football. New England with their third-string quarterback managed to put up a 29-point game. I think one of the touchdowns came from the defensive side, but still, I mean, Jacoby Myers, a guy I don't like at all, wouldn't want to play, put up 24.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off real quick. I am, though. I've been a Jacoby Myers guy. I've said it on the show. He had 7 receptions on 8 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown. I like Jacoby Myers on the season. I do. And I'm going to tell you guys to start playing him more often. I was a little bit scared to this week, knowing that he's coming off an injury and Zeppi was starting, but I'm going to tell you to play him more often because I think he's really talented and I think they like him over there.
Ramondre Stevenson put up his, I believe it's his best game of the year. If it's not, it's number 2. Number 2 on the season, but very close to being the one. And then Hunter Henry, who fell off the face of the earth, didn't have a good fantasy day, but had his best game of the year. So moving forward, all your guys, all your debatable guys, they're must starts against this defense.
We can just kind of gloss over this next game.
Not
much to talk about. Dolphins at Jets.
A lot of chirping over there from down in Florida, my buddy.
No. Hold on. I haven't done a lot of chirping. I picked the Jets. Wait, hold on.
I heard 5 for 5. We've been recording this podcast for 8 weeks now, and you've been talking terribly about them.
No. Excuse me, mister.
One game, all but one game, and a 40-point bomb against a loaded roster outside of quarterback, and the Jets shut them down. Go ahead. Go do your thing.
No, hold on. If you look at my all boom teams the last 2 weeks, I believe I had Jets on both of them.
They didn't deliver, but yes, you did.
They didn't deliver because they're Jets. Just proves my point. I'm kidding. I'm not. The Jets I'm going to let Nick speak first, but I have some positive stuff to say about the New York Jets. I'm going to let Nick speak first. This is his team, and there's a lot of points to talk about. So
you could talk. I could talk about any part of my Jets team, and I'll feel good.
Okay. Well, before we talk about the Jets, I'm going to mention a Dolphin because Raheem Mostert had 113 yards and a touchdown. I think he's the running back one over there. This goes back to we know nothing, but I just want to mention that if Mostert's still on waivers, pick him up, and if he's on your team, like I think that's a guy you can kind of use week in and week out. Okay, so let me talk about the Jets a little bit because the Jets looked horrendous with Flacco, and I don't think you really judge a team with Flacco. Like Flacco's not good. They did beat the Browns. That was a miraculous comeback. But with Zach Wilson, they're now 2-2. He looks decent. He doesn't look like a guy that's gonna, throw for 500 yards. He hasn't been asked to yet. And when a game against like the Bucks, but that's okay. He doesn't need to do that yet. He doesn't make mistakes, which I like. He hasn't made bad throws. He hasn't really made mistakes. So I do like that. So I'll give him that. He's good at least controlling the ball. The running game is great. Like it really is. Breece Hall, what did he have? 200 total yards or something? I think he had close to 200 total yards, a touchdown. And Michael Carter vultured 2 of those touchdowns. He could have had like a 50-point fantasy day almost. So that's a reality what he could have had. And I think this team could run through the running backs. That's a fantasy positive. That's okay. Run this team through the running backs. Now, what that also means is I don't think any receiver eclipsed 4 targets today. Am I right on that?
Only one receiver had 4 targets or 2. So it's not like the Chargers in week 1 where there were like 6 or 7 guys that had 4 targets.
Yeah.
It was only 2.
So. Yeah. So I'm not telling you to drop your Jets receivers, but I am telling you that like as talented as a guy like Garrett Wilson or Elijah Moore is, like I can't feel comfortable playing them until I see improvement. And I don't think it's a talent problem. Like I said, like if the running game's working, that's going to be their identity. That's totally okay. That's going to win them football games. So you know what? I want to see what the Jets are made of. I do. I want to see what's going to happen this season. They're 3-2. A lot of games left to be played. The rookies look great. Looks like they drafted well, which a lot of people said before the season. So let's see what happens with them. I'm not saying they're going to be a great team, but I'm tempering the expectations that I'm going to see exactly what they're made of.
I'm going to talk quick about both sides of the ball because, as the resident Jets fan that's had nothing happy in his life about this team since like 2010, I deserve my 5 minutes or 3 minutes of Jets talk real quick. Breece Hall.
And I want to say, you know what? This is the most positive we've seen from the Jets in a while. And this isn't just like I know Nick wants to talk, so I'm going to make this quick. This isn't like the Fitzpatrick, year in 2015 where it's like, he's clearly not your quarterback of the future. This is a fluky year. This is actually something that could be something. So I think that's what makes it exciting. It's kind of what I thought the Knicks would be like 2 years ago. And then they're still the Knicks.
The Jets are about an offensive tackle away from being a real threat in this league. Like, and I mean that genuinely. I'm not saying that just as like a Jets front runner. Like the talent is there with the receivers. You saw it with the first 3 games with Flacco when they needed to throw the ball to receivers. They were making big plays. They were doing what they had to do. The running game, Nick already talked about, so I don't need to pound the desk. Thriving. Tight end game looks good. Uzoma looked better than Conklin was out there. Like it's fine. The defense on the secondary is phenomenal. They shut down Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They held the 2 of them to the worst game that they had, the worst pair of a game that they've had all year. And that's with 2 rookie cornerbacks that are leading the way. So the Jets look phenomenal. Like they're going to be a nightmare matchup. Next week, they're in Lambeau. Like we already talked about how we don't trust like the Packers based on matchup. There is no way I'm trusting Romeo Doubs against Sauce.
This is a big NFL game to see where both teams really are. Because I think the Packers are a level above the Giants. You could chalk it up to maybe the Giants aren't as bad as I think they are, or London. But this is a big game for both teams next week, and I'm excited to see what kind of transpires.
The one thing I'm going to take away is as high as I am on Breece Hall, and I love him. I think he's an all-world talent. I said it before the year that I liked him a lot. Nick had to clown him. He said, "Oh, he's a Jet." Guess what? That Jet is currently the RB10 in fantasy football.
Now hold on. I clowned him because Michael Carter was behind him.
You don't get the whole. You clowned. You said you do not trust the Jets running back to finish in the top 15. Well, guess what? He's outperforming that guy Travis Etienne that on your hottest takes said will finish as a top 5 running back. I don't mean to cut you off, but guess what? That's the fact of the matter. Breece Hall, week over week, more rushing attempts, more yards in every single one of those games, more touchdowns, more volume, 200 all-purpose yards, most ever by a Jets rookie. He is the heartbeat of the offense, not Michael Carter. If it wasn't for the Vultures, it's a 40-point game, and Breece Hall is the RB5 in fantasy football at the moment. So trust Breece Hall. Trust him moving forward. Lock him in your lineup. Matchup-proof running back. Done. Worst game of the year, week 1 with 10 points. Since then, 15's been the floor. No reason not to trust him. He's like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just get him out on that field.
Is my ESPN not updating? I was looking to see where he was on the season. I
had to check on Twitter because it doesn't update till the following day. You won't be able to see it on this.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Okay. See, I thought I thought I was looking at the updated numbers. Okay, sounds good. Okay, Falcons at the Buccaneers.
I need a minute. Just like you need your minute.
All right. All right. I'll start it off then. Leonard Fournette had a great game, and he had 56 rushing yards, a touchdown, then 10 receptions for 80 yards. Check down Tom was at it again, and it was to Leonard Fournette. I still don't know what to make of the Bucs because they barely won this game against a really bad Falcons team, and the Bucs were home. I thought they would have beat them by more. I don't know. Like, the entire NFC is just filled with average good teams, and I just don't know what to make of some of them. Like, I don't know. Sunday Night Football is going to be exciting next week, the Cowboys and the Eagles, because they're two top teams in the NFC. But I can't even tell you what a good team in the NFC is right now. Maybe the Cowboys. Maybe the Cowboys and the Eagles are for real. But anyway, great game from Leonard Fournette. I need to see the Bucs against a good team because they haven't looked good against good teams, and they didn't really look good against a bad team. But anyway, maybe this is what we need from Leonard Fournette. If he starts getting in the passing down role, I was a little bit worried about Rashad White creeping up, but if Brady's trusting him to throw 10 balls to him and catches all of them, like that's really good for Fournette owners. So that's what I got.
My biggest takeaway is that there's really not much to take away, right? I don't feel like I learned anything about Atlanta. I know the same things that I knew beforehand. I knew they couldn't get the ball down the field. I knew you really can't trust Marcus Mariota. I know Drake London. It depends on his matchup if he's a starter on your team. Like, I feel like I learned nothing about the Falcons. And for Tampa Bay, I learned nothing. You start Godwin, you start Evans and Brady, depending on the like that's really it. It's all these guys prove to be what we thought they would be. That's it.
The Titans at the Commanders. What do you want to talk about? Do you want to go first here?
No, go for it.
I don't know. I like both of these points. Do you have a different point than the ones that are listed?
No, you take one. I'll take the other.
Okay. You're a Gibson. Well, you were a Gibson owner, so I'll let you take that one. Derrick Henry killed me in 2 leagues. He had like 35 points in 2 leagues, and Nick's been anti-Derrick Henry this year. And I'm not telling you I've been pro-Derrick Henry, but like the dude is like, I think he's got to be in the top 5 by now. I think. If ESPN's not updated, then he's top 8 at least. He had like 100 yards, 3 receptions, which isn't a lot, but then he had like 2 touchdowns, and he could have had a third. He's still Derrick Henry. I know he had a rough 2 games, and if you traded him away, shame on you for giving up on the guy you just drafted in round 1 who's like a 250-pound running back. So he's still Derrick Henry. That's my takeaway, is that if you're facing Derrick Henry, like, I hope you have a star on the other side like Cooper Kupp, because if you missed your first-round draft pick, if you messed it up, like, if you drafted in the back half and you draft Stephon Diggs, like, you're screwed. That's the reality of it.
So Nick made the point, so I'm also going to have to push for it. But Antonio Gibson is running back by committee over there. It did not look good for any of the backs. None of them had a good day against Tennessee, who does have a good front 7. So I will keep that in mind. Gibson did still see the leader in the work, but on the snaps that Brian Robinson did play, he rushed on a little over 50% of them. So that tells me Brian Robinson, once he's out there, once he's fully healthy, he's taking over as the back over there. I did trade Gibson in a league, and I'm going to force Nick to make us talk about it on tomorrow's episode, because we've been having a big debate in one of our group chats about it. But overall, like, it's not a pleasant situation over there. I typically say you should start the starting running back from every team. Like, there's 2 running back spots per roster. If you're in a 10-team league, that should be 20 starters, and every single one of them should be rostered. I'm not saying you can't roster Antonio Gibson, but as long as there's 3 running backs over there, he is not going to see pleasant workload because
Perfect situation where we know nothing. We know nothing. Gibson was a 3-down back for like 2 weeks and he looked good with it. And then they start using McKissic again. And now Brian Robinson comes back. We know nothing.
It's exactly what we said when Ron Rivera went there. It was Ron Rivera's going there. Antonio Gibson's an all-world talent at running back, and they're going to use him like Christian McCaffrey. That's what I believe he was going like end of the first round, early second round that year. I'm pretty sure it's the year Kamara finished as the RB1 2 years ago when he took over, and they're not doing it. They did it for 2 weeks. It worked. That was when they were an electric offense. They were one of the best offenses in football.
And I also don't want to say I told you so, but if you did listen to our Sunday morning show, I told everybody to trade him. Like if you had Antonio Gibson, I said trade him now. And he had value before the game. Now, I don't know what you trade him for. Trade him for some doggy treats if you have a dog. Like, I don't know what you trade him for. Texans at the Jaguars in the most AFC South of AFC South games possible, besides it ending in a tie. That's the only thing that could have made this game better. What do you got? I mean, I know what you want to talk about, so I'll let you talk about it. But make sure you talk about my note in there in all caps, because that costs fantasy points. That might cost me my week. Okay, I'm going to be in a projected matchup that's going to end within like 2 points, and that stat right there probably gets me 3.
Oh, Dameon Pierce. I was so high on you and Nick.
We both were. You were probably a little bit higher.
I was definitely higher because I reached on him a round and a half, 2 rounds early in our bonus league. So here's where I'll plug Nick's line: get to the 100 yards, because at 100 yards we get a 3-point bonus in our leagues, and you finished at 99. It's terrible. It hurts to look at, but. At the end of the day, Antonio Gibson still getting monster workload. He's going to bye this following week. But my God,
Pierce, right? Not Antonio Gibson.
What?
You said Antonio Gibson.
My bad. Dameon Pierce, you're an absolute beast, and man, do I love him. I think he's so talented, and if they could actually figure out a quarterback situation and how to get the ball, push it down the field, and you could see game by game touchdown upside from him, like. This guy's got a whole nother level of a ceiling, but the ceiling is low because it is still the Texans.
So another team, I'm going to keep repeating this. We know nothing about the Jaguars. Like, I'm just saying, like, we don't know anything. I thought Christian Kirk was like a lineup lock, and they're facing the Texans defense that's horrendous. And then Marvin Jones has 7 receptions on 11 targets for 104 yards. Evan Ingram has 6 receptions on 69 yards, nice, and 10 targets. Then you have Christian Kirk down here, 1 reception, 11 yards on 3 targets. Zay Jones had 8 targets, who we've been high on, but so there's that frustrating thing. And then let's talk about this. You did knock me a little bit for my Travis Etienne take. However, which running back do you want going forward?
James Robinson.
Do you? Because James Robinson, his fantasy numbers have gone down every week since week 1. His snaps have been going down. Etienne's been eating into both of those. Etienne outscored him this week. Etienne had more yards than him this week, and he had more receptions as well and more targets.
I see a lot more moments of frustration from that staff about Etienne out there with drops and fumbles. And there was one today where I thought that they were going to lose it because they put him in the game. He caught the ball. It was a fumble ruled on the field. It was reversed to be an incomplete pass. And you could see the frustration from him. So I do still like Robinson moving forward, but I do think Etienne could take over. I'm
going to say this. I'm not telling you it can happen because I'm an Etienne owner and I don't feel comfortable starting him. However, with the way that things are trending, could Etienne be this year's Rashad Penny when it comes to those last 6 weeks? I'm not saying it can happen, but he's in his rookie season. He is a rookie. He didn't play last year. It's going to take some time, like it does for most rookies. Breece Hall is starting to really break out now, and he's better than Etienne, probably from an NFL talent perspective. It took him 5 weeks, and now he's really broke out. So it may take Etienne another 4 or 5 weeks to really assume a top role and to figure out where he is in the offense. But you know what? He corrects a couple of those drops and stuff. Like week 1, he should have had 2 touchdowns. 1 Trevor missed and 1 he dropped. It could happen. He's outstopping James Robinson. He's looking better than James Robinson. And I had James Robinson as my big boom of the week, and I was wrong. On to those 4:30 games. The 49ers at the Panthers. The Panthers absolutely suck. They're really, really bad. So what would you like to talk about?
Two quick things. Yes, the Panthers suck. I expected, like Nick, I expect a coaching change. I would not be surprised if they came out with a quarterback change as well. They need it. They need something to freshen up that offense. It does not look good. But on San Francisco side of the ball, George Kittle looked good in football again for 3 straight weeks. Looked very good. Looked great as a blocker. And he got his most workload that he's seen all year with 6 targets and 5 catches. But he still looks like a blocker. He does not look like he's going to be the elite tight end of the past. Like many of us were debating 2 years ago, George Kittle's a better tight end than Travis Kelce. And while that might be true for real football, like that's still out for debate in the passing game and where his workload needs to be. Kyle Shanahan is not going to run him like that. He still doesn't trust Jimmy Garoppolo, just like the Bears don't trust Justin Fields to throw the ball. There's a reason they got Trey Lance is because they felt like they needed someone that could go make plays by themselves. And you were drafting George Kittle to be Trey Lance's tight end, not to be Jimmy Garoppolo's.
So I have 2 points. The first being that the 49ers cannot support more than 2 fantasy relevant players on a week-to-week basis. I'm not even including Jimmy Garoppolo because he's not going to be fantasy relevant ever. This week it was Jeff Wilson, and you can make an argument for Kittle. But Deebo Samuel, 2 receptions, 20 yards on 9 targets and a touchdown. So he still had 9 points, but not a great game. Brandon Ayuk, 3 receptions, 58 yards on 4 targets. You talked about Kittle. Then you have Jeff Wilson, 120 yards and a touchdown, 1 reception, 12 yards. The 49ers are a messy football team. They're a good football team in NFL terms. From a fantasy perspective, they're a messy team because they spread the ball around. You don't know who's going to get theirs, and it's going to be very tough to predict going forward. One more point. Tevin Coleman, are you kidding me, Shanahan? Are you kidding me? Tevin Coleman, right? I'm so annoyed I literally logged out of this ESPN thing when I was reading the stats off of. So bear with me for 1 second. Well, I pulled. Listen, I have Jeff Wilson in a matchup where I'm facing a dude, my boy John, who has Derrick Henry, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Travis Kelce, and Mahomes. So you know what? I am gonna bitch a little bit because I need every point I could get, and I don't need Tevin Coleman vulturing touchdowns. Tevin Coleman got 8 carries for 23 yards and an average of 2.9. One of those was a touchdown. Like, why? And then Tevin Coleman gets 3 receptions for 44 yards with a touchdown. Why? Like, I know he likes doing this stupid committee crap, but come on, dude. Like Jeff Wilson has 17 carries for 120 yards, an average of 7 yards per carry, and a touchdown. He looked good. Even from a football perspective, he looked good. Without his starting tackle, by the way. And you go with Tevin Coleman. Shanahan's on my shit list with Nathaniel Hackett. I hate Shanahan, and I've hated him for a while for reasons like this. Like, Shanahan's annoying where Hackett is stupid. Anyway, Cowboys at the Rams. Your biggest takeaway from this one?
So my biggest takeaway has to do with some news, so I'll read it off right now. Dak Prescott is now considered day-to-day. He will be seeing a doctor on Tuesday to confirm whether he can play this week or not.
He shouldn't play. He
should absolutely be playing. That is my takeaway. These receivers absolutely suck for fantasy. The Rams secondary was actually awful up until this game. This game, it was their running game, which was the Rams are the number 1 team against the run this year. And they couldn't hold Tony Pollard and his breakaway speed. I said it. I had Zeke on my all bust team this week because I said Zeke doesn't have the speed and the breakaway ability that Pollard does. Pollard's the only chance that they're going to have to actually move the ball down the field. And if it wasn't for turnovers from Matthew Stafford and that offense, like this team wouldn't have gotten any yards down the field. I think they had 200 or 250 all-purpose yards in the game entirely. They only had 100 yards in the air from Cooper Rush. Like, this team needs Dak. Those receivers need Dak. So for me, when you're telling me he's going to have 100 yards and now he's going into Philly next week, like, if it's not Dak, I'm not playing any of those receivers over there. I'm not playing CeeDee Lamb on Darius Slay. I'm not playing Dalton Schultz. I'm definitely not starting Gallup without him. So, and do you play Zeke? No, you don't really want to play Zeke. So is Tony Pollard going to be the most startable player next week? No, maybe, but no, like there's no Cowboy that you can trust without Dak in that offense. So I'm very, very worried for next week. And then they follow it up with hosting Detroit and hosting Chicago. So if you can get through this 1 week, or if you have the ability to go trade for a CeeDee Lamb right now, go do it because you're going to come out of those 2 games, a bye week, and then a great rest of season schedule for him.
That was my biggest point. Is that if the running back is going to run like this, then they can't support the receiver. So that was my biggest point as well. Eagles at Cardinals. My biggest point is that the Cardinals are very, very bad against the tight ends. And I've said it before. Dallas Goedert was on my all boom team for this reason. Goddard had 8 receptions, 95 yards on 9 targets. Didn't have the touchdown, but still a 17-point fantasy day. Phenomenal from your tight end. My other point, I've said it before, the Eagles are a running team. It's going to be really tough to support both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown every week. I think one of them will go off where Devontae Smith had 10 receptions. 10 receptions for 87 yards. That's almost 19 fantasy points. A.J. Brown did not have a good game, but again, it was a running game where Hurts had 61 yards and Miles Sanders had 58. So it's going to be tough. Your biggest takeaway from this one?
That Arizona Cardinals team really needs DeAndre Hopkins back in there.
Oh, they're going to get him back next week.
They are. And I say that because they're built very well. Like they actually have a very good team. They're 2-3, but they've been close in every single game. Or they've came back after their first half struggles. They're playing well. They actually are. And they need DeAndre Hopkins over there because they need a trusted player. Kyler, I don't think still has that trusted Marquise Brown yet. I know Marquise Brown is performing for fantasy. I was low on him. He's playing much better than I thought. As to this point in the season, I'm pretty sure he's a top 10 receiver on the league.
I think he is. And he's 4th in receptions. He's 8th in yards, and the touchdowns aren't great. So I don't think I think you trust him, but I think you're right where he doesn't have the alpha. But Marquise Brown has been, he's been good. He has been good.
So I'm not saying I think Marquise Brown has one of 2 options when DeAndre Hopkins comes back. He's either going to majority of those targets are going to go over to him, over to Hopkins, and Marquise is going to have to play more of the Gabe Davis, Rashad Bateman type role where it's go down the field, go burn them. You're going to catch 1 or 2 balls a game. You'll get 5-6 targets. And that's a great role for Marquise Brown, but I think he's a better receiver than that. I think he's proven that so far this year. And I think the other option is he's the same exact player, and DeAndre Hopkins is going to go be a 6-target clutch guy on your 3rd down big play.
That's what I'm leaning towards because I don't think Rondale Moore's getting 7 targets. I don't think Benjamin gets targets. AJ Green, I think the targets just go to those.
I think I was wrong on Brown. I don't think Hopkins is going to come in and I think he'll be alpha on the big plays, but I don't think
I think he's more of a red zone threat I think he's more of a red zone threat, Hopkins, than he is a target machine because Marquise Brown's
but there they still have Connor and Ertz.
Right. But the 12 targets you're getting aren't going to go away. So
yeah.
All right. Real quick before we get out of here, Monday Night Football preview. We have projections for each. We're just going to go over under really quick. Should be easy because it's going to be an over game probably. Mahomes 23.3. I've learned just not doubt Mahomes. I would rather be wrong about the over than the under. Correct. The Raiders aren't good.
Correct. Going over.
Derek Carr 17.7.
I need the over, so I'm going to say over.
Again, I'm almost tempted to literally just tell you over for all these. Clyde Edwards-Helaire 14.1.
Way over.
I'll also say over. Josh Jacobs 13.7.
Over. Chiefs are one of the worst teams against the run.
They're really bad against the run.
Juju.
I wrote July. 12.8. Over. This is the game where Juju can get a big touchdown.
He doesn't get big touchdowns. He's not going to be a 50-yard touchdown. He's going.
I think he can be.
I don't think so. That's not his role. I'm gonna say he gets the over, but it's gonna be on workload, not on a 50-yard bomb.
Devontae Adams 20.
I'll go over. They're gonna be playing from behind most of the game. He's gonna get another 10-target game.
I'm going under 17 or 18. Marquise Valdes-Scantling 11.1.
Under.
I'm also going
big
under.
Touchdown or bust.
Hunter Renfrow 12.1.
Under. Matt Collins out-targeted him in the last game they both played.
Under, right around 10. Travis Kelce 17.8. I've learned to always take the over on Kelce.
Always take the over, Kelce. Over.
Darren Waller 11.4. He gets a touchdown. I'll say over.
Yeah, I can see that. Over.
Okay. That was very quick, but listen, that's the game we're getting. They're always high-scoring games with those two. All right. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this episode. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We'd appreciate that. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a like on this video, hit a subscribe, and then click that little bell button on the top to get notifications. We'd appreciate that as well. Keep checking in with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, PrimeTimeFFPod, Facebook, and YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. You'll hear from us tomorrow, Waiver Wire Tuesday. We'll probably talk some trades. We'll talk about the news of the week. It's going to be a lot of fun. You'll talk to us then. Enjoy Monday Night Football tonight, guys, and we'll start preparing you for Week 6.